All right. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on which coast and where you sit. I appreciate everyone taking the time today to meet with Aqua, Refactr, and Trace3. I think we've got a great webinar for you guys on a very topic that we're definitely seeing a lot of momentum building around. And not only a lot of momentum, a lot of need, and a lot of confusion on how to really optimize this space. And uh, building, cloud native tools using how do you actually secure Kubernetes overall. And so I'm going to jump right in and intro really the kind of stars of the show. My name is Brian House. I will be your MC today. I'm a VP of Innovation and Emerging Tech at Trace3. But you guys are really here to hear from the three experts that we've got on the panel today. We've got Jimmy Zhu who'll be kicking things off. He's overall director and at Trace3. So he runs our DevSecOps and cloud security practice here at Trace3. After Jimmy kind of sets the stage, Biagio and Michael Fraser from Refactr will be jumping right in. So Michael, Air Force veteran, serial entrepreneur, professor and an instructor, and infrastructure, cloud, and DevOps security, and the founder of Refactr, which is a really cool platform that he'll jump into and really show how you can utilize that to secure your pipeline without really slowing down your development cycles. And then Biagio from Aqua is going to talk. He's a solutions architect there. He's going to be really talking through and show us how Aqua can help support and really secure your Kubernetes environment. And one cool fact I learned about Biagio through this process, he's an Eagle Scout, so that is awesome. And recent graduate of Boston University. So I appreciate the three of you guys stepping up and doing this webinar, which is awesome. So we'll jump right in, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about, before we get to the slide, we're going to talk a little bit about Trace3 and who Trace3 is. You're going to hear about Refactr and, Aqua, and really Trace3 is kind of the glue that can put all this together and assist you. So we're a national strategic technology partner. And so a little bit different or very different from what your traditional VAR is out there. We really focus on innovation and emerging technology and helping bring those to our customers to solve problems and help bring these these new and emerging technologies to market. We've got a focus area where we can actually provide consulting, resale, and implementation services around, AI, data intelligence, cloud, public and private, infrastructure, operational intelligence, and security. And that's the main focus of this overall. We've got 24 offices. I mentioned we're nationwide. We got 900 plus employees, and really we love working with the founders of these new and emerging tech, help bringing those to market and taking these solutions to be able to solve complex problems that are out there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael, Jimmy, and Biagio.
Thanks, Brian. So we'll start with what is cloud native, and where better to talk about cloud native than CNCF. And so their definition around cloud native, I really like, and it really kind of focuses on, the cloud native technologies out there that help organizations and empower them to build and run scalable applications in modern dynamic environments, really around public and private cloud and even hybrid, which what a lot of organizations are doing, focusing on container, service mesh, microservices, immutable infrastructure, and declarative APIs, which is really key here to ensure that you're really building something that's more, not just modern, but also something that is built into a lot of different technologies, including Kubernetes and what we're going to talk about today around Kubernetes. Next slide. So with cloud native, we also need to know that we have to look at what is DevOps and using DevOps around cloud native. That is imperative for a successful solution that you would create and secure around not just Kubernetes, but everything that is around it. And DevOps came to the forefront about over 10 years ago now, adding agile infrastructure, essentially infrastructure as code and everything around that to agile software delivery. And DevSecOps is really about adding agile security to DevOps. And the key is to have all three teams working together. So we've had DevOps with Dev and Ops teams working together for for the last 10 plus years. And now adding security in DevSecOps has been around for a few years now. And I don't look at it as just adding security to DevOps, but really kind of this holistic automation approach to include all three teams working together, and even other ancillary teams that would be working with these different teams, to really have a holistic approach where security is built into the process and it's not an afterthought or something that we would just bolt in or use something after the fact, and really has to be something fully integrated into your DevSecOps lifecycle and DevSecOps pipelining process. So it's key to just realize that it's not just about adding security in, but it's really about holistic automation.
All right. So like Michael said, right? So he kind of explained the DevSecOps. It's been around for a couple of years. Everybody talks about it. We in the past, we talked a lot about the benefits of DevSecOps, but in reality, before we get into the technical part of the value of Refactr and Aqua, I think it's good to kind of share us at Trace3 when we do a lot of these engagement with our customers around the actual, call it adoption implementation. What do we observe out there, right? The fact matters, it's the benefit is great, but it's very difficult to actually implement, right? To take into practice. I want to share a few things that I kind of set the condition around why it's why it's a challenge, and why that in solution like this is really going to help out to realize the benefit, and actually take the implementation part to really simplify and make it easy to adopt. So very first, right, just a couple things. So this just came out. This was actually talked about on one of the 451 research, right? From a people perspective, right? Talking about, why is DevSecOps hard to do? Because it does require, like Michael said on the last slide, people working together, right? The dev, the ops, the security. But what we still find is, if you look at the top left part, right? This is pretty recent. The skills gap here, right? You got people, right? People with cloud platform expertise is very hard to find, right? Talking about the platform in general, as well as cloud native. And then you got security, right? Specifically application security and cloud security. And then you got DevOps, right? Which is all the automation, DevOps in general. It's hard to find each of these resources separately. Now, when you want to combine them all for successful DevSecOps, you're really looking into a unicorn problem, right? Can't tell you how many times when so many job descriptions out there that require you to know everything, right? But it's hard. It's hard to find a unicorn. So what we really need to do is to find the people that can be good at each of these three areas and have them work together. Now, because of that, what we also find is that, security, although it cannot do everything, right, is, we find that when security wants to bring to the table, work with DevOps, in situations where they work well, things are great. But if it's not, then the security engineers really need to, kind of need to have that automation experience, and maybe hopefully with the development background to kind of contribute. So we come in a lot to help augment that, but what we see is that really, it'd be nice, right, to have something that would help engineers, specifically security engineers who may not have a software engineering background or automation background, for them to use something that to even the level playing field to do this automation, right? It's a much easier way than writing a bunch of code and for scripts. Culture-wise, as Mike stated, right? If you look at the bottom left, right? I'll tell you that it said we see the top two, right? Actually, DevOps and SecOps are working together, and the benefit's great. We also find that the second one, working independently but not together, still working towards the same goal is always good. Now, I can tell you, I don't have anybody that has like believe that InfoSec owns DevSecOps, has the sole proprietary experience or responsibility. But in general, the cross-functional collaboration, like the dev and ops and security, it's still got ways to go. We've seen mixed results, right? But that goes to show you that, we have ways to go, but in order to kind of help accelerate that, it'd be nice for everybody to kind of understand and have the skill sets, right? To beat the unicorn problem, but also have the capability to contribute, right? And to work together. So, which also means that the operating model we find, right, when you talk about DevSecOps, is changing, right? Teams got to work together, but what we find is that it's all about the unified goal of enabling developers to take on more responsibilities, right? Empowering them to not only develop applications but deploy applications in an automated way with security built in. So more of a self-service model. But why is that important? That's important because when you start thinking about the automation and integrating and the practices with how DevSecOps provide, it's a platform so that you're enabling developers to do the right thing, right? So think about the implication around the ease of integration, right? And what you have to deal with when when all these tools, right? Brian, next. Yeah. So we talk a lot about automation, right? So I always say that there's a difference between technical possibility and operational feasibility. What does that mean? Just because you can automate a lot of things, right? And you can automate security testing to the pipeline, but when we start turning on gating, right? And in a world of possible combination of a tooling, right? Both the build tools, the testing tools. When you turn on, okay, I want to fail this gate here with security concerns, it's not always straightforward. You don't want to slow them down. You want to improve quality, but it's difficult, right? It's difficult to achieve. It's easy to integrate, but you got to have a lot of more of operational concerns. We find patterns where you don't want to slow down the pipeline, right? So you could have in parallel some security pipelines, right? Which is, I'm not going to steal Michael's thunder here, right? And where you can be creative around integration, right? Automation in such a way not slow down the deployment. What that also means is that when we work with different tooling companies, right? We find that when you turn the conceptual things into reality, we find that a lot of the creativity around how to do automation in a pipeline are too constrained with some of the tools, right? When we help our customers rationalize the tool sets, we find that sometimes this tool only supports these type of workflow, then we're constrained, right? So we do a lot of work to build some customized workflows and automation, but it would be nice, right, for our customer to have something that's easy to plug and play, almost like you got all these pieces like Legos, but to put them together, right? Last thing I'm going to mention is the fragmented space. And this is one area where you can include all these beautiful security tooling, automate that, integrate that into the pipeline. But there's no single silver bullet where there's one tool that can do everything, right? So you have different strengths and weaknesses, but in terms of integration, the complexity really triples, right? When you need to integrate all these tools, might require different workflows. You have to consider how do you actually integrate and how do you actually develop these workflows so that they'll work harmoniously across many different tool sets. Next slide, please. So just show you, I think if this is eye candy, right? I mean, this is a little bit extreme, but it's a good representation of what we typically find in a large organization, right? You have lots of integration points, and just look at how difficult it is. I don't need to tell you, just think about if you're the hands-on keyboard engineer and need to integrate that one unicorn, that I need to make this happen, right? What does it take? So on the bottom, really see that what we typically do, right, is how do we put all these pieces together, right, in a way that's very easy for the customer to consume, to automate, but also think about the proper gating. across very different tool sets. I did not put any labels on there with the actual vendors, but just think about the number of vendors we have to deal with, right? So again, going back to it being nice to have something, right, that can help us plug and play many different tools into a flexible type of pipeline that can integrate with various scenarios to help many different teams with variance in their tooling processes. Next slide.
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. So while we've obviously discussed a lot about having an increased adoption of cloud native cloud platforms and containerization, obviously what this is additionally going to do is give us an increased reliance on Kubernetes, right? And of course, that similar skill gap to think about. So really quickly, we want to give an overview of Kubernetes for anyone who's not well aware, and obviously discuss how we can help secure those cloud native K8s deployments. So Kubernetes is an open source platform for managing containerized workloads and services. And quickly, let's go over just some of the components here, right? Control plane components. Taking a look at etcd, which is our highly available key store for storing our clustered data. Components like Kube API server and Kube scheduler, which are going to expose the Kubernetes APIs and do the actual scheduling of pods and containers on nodes, respectively. With the Kube controller manager, we're going to be looking at a tool that actually helps run the controller processes in Kubernetes. And then, of course, right, if you are using Kubernetes on a cloud platform, you're going to have the cloud controller manager, right, which is going to help embed some logic specific to your cloud provider into Kubernetes. Now, with of course, our worker nodes, right, we're going to be looking at a couple more components. Kubelet, right, the actual agent that runs on each node. It's going to help us ensure that our container pods are running, successfully, as well as kubeproxy, which is going to allow our node to have, outside interaction with the internet. And then finally, we need our good old container runtime. Okay, so now on to the next slide. Of course, this is going to help us, really kind of visualize what we have here, right? So it's important to understand, where these connections actually occur and how we will need to secure once we've done, actual deployments of Kubernetes, right? So we can see in the middle our master node existing, of course, with our API server, our controller manager, and Kube scheduler. And this is what we're going to interact with via kubectl, right? That command line tool that allows us to send commands to the master node, the API server, and get those responses back, with some automation as well. With our worker nodes, of course, we're going to see, the kubelet, of course, doing that management of the pods on each node, kubeproxy allowing us to have access to the internet, of course, for management with our pods, and then finally, again, on our master node, our etcd storage for our cluster. So this is a really quick overview of Kubernetes. And next, we're going to talk a little bit about really how from the instant that you have Kubernetes, you need to begin thinking about how you want to secure it. So if we can go to the next slide. So one of the ways that we can secure Kubernetes in cloud native environments is going to be through the use of Aqua. So Aqua, very quickly, is about a 5-year-old company. We have more than 300 employees, and our focus really is on securing cloud native applications and environments. We have a number of open source projects and enterprise solutions as well. Some of our open source projects, which you can find on our GitHub, include Trivy, KubeBench, KubeHunter, all image scanning and Kubernetes and containerized environment pen testing and monitoring tools. And so we are relative to containers, a pretty old company, right? We've been around for 5 years, and so we've got a really good idea as to kind of what needs to be secured to make sure that your environments, your workloads, and your infrastructure are all going to be secure. So really, we focus on the build, infrastructure, and workloads, right? So earliest on in the process, we want to look at the build, making sure that we can integrate with DevOps, include that security in there more seamlessly, and give that DevSecOps some life, right? So we want to make sure that whatever we're building, whether it's Kubernetes environments, whether it's container images, make sure that we can detect things early on in build pipelines through the use of existing developer tools and give them that information early on. With infrastructure, we're going to, again, make sure that where that Kubernetes, deployment lies is going to be secure. So whether that's, actual public cloud infrastructure from your major cloud providers, securing that, or whether it's doing pen testing on the Kubernetes deployment itself, again, through the use of some of our open source tools, we're able to make sure that that Kubernetes configuration is, the best it can be. And then finally, those workloads that, of course, run in Kubernetes, we want to be sure that those are secure as well. So Aqua offers a number of options for securing the actual running containers through an agent approach. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So finally, what does that integrated approach allow us to do, right? So covering those three pillars allows for much better coverage of cloud native deployments. We find that through the use of build, infrastructure, and workloads, you can really get a good idea of kind of what's going on in Kubernetes and what you have deployed in those cloud native environments. For example, understanding the contents of build artifacts allows us to have much better runtime control, right? So you can't just focus on scanning in the build, right? Or just looking at the infrastructure. If you don't have a holistic view of all of the components, it's going to be much harder to secure where you have all of your applications deployed, right? So for example, infrastructure as code assessment, for something like Terraform or CloudFormation, which Aqua has, is going to give us, of course, a safer place to run our workloads, right? Reducing the risk that we have in our infrastructure is going to give us a safer place to run workloads. So that is really, a quick overview of, Aqua and what Aqua does, and I'll pass it over to Mike now. Oh, sorry, one more slide for me. So finally, right, we just want to quickly show the Aqua Platform. So the Aqua Platform, of course, we have a number of integrations that we can do, right? So covering those build workloads and infrastructure components, right? With the build, again, integration with existing CI/CD tools, with pipelines, as well as registries. For your workloads, we cover pretty much every type of cloud native workload, whether it's VMs, not running containers, whether it's containerized environments, whether it's even serverless functions across all clouds and orchestration platforms. And then, of course, with infrastructure, right, covering both the Kubernetes security side of things with, CIS benchmarks for Kubernetes and Kubernetes pen testing, as well as that CSPM, cloud security posture management of the actual cloud itself.
Awesome. So with that being said, coming back to DevSecOps pipelines and specifically on the different stages of your pipelining process, you may or may not be building from scratch applications, but if you are, starting from your source code, your build, and then introducing security into each stage of your pipelining process and figuring out what you're trying to use from a different tooling set. So as Biagio said, Aqua has a bunch of different products and offerings around infrastructure as code scanning, image scanning, even runtime scanning as well. And then really kind of looking at what are you going to use for remediation. And a lot of organizations that I work with like to build their own remediation in various tools like, Ansible or their own scripts, or, being able to use the built-in remediation that some of the different products that Aqua has can do as well. And the key there is to figure out what tools you're going to use each step of your pipelining process, making sure you decouple them into separate pipelines, which is really easy to do in the Refactr platform. And also like looking at starting from your image hardening as well, looking at what that looks like as well. So you may start with your IAC, but you may just start from images too. So just depending on where you're at and how you want to try to tackle adding in security. So I always recommend start small and start in one area of your pipeline or one section of your pipeline stage. And then also make sure that your remediation is only set up during your testing or dev environment. So in production, everything is already hardened and packaged up and ready to go. and look at the different tools that you can use at each of the stages, because you may find a different tool may be better for you. So I kind of take an agnostic approach from a standpoint of figure out what makes the most sense from you from a tooling perspective. You know, I just did a presentation for CubeSec around Center for Internet Security benchmarking as well. So you can look at different benchmark, you know, like CIS, look at their benchmarking too, and see how you can incorporate different controls at different stages of the process, and then incorporate the tools that make the most sense. The nice thing is Aqua also has some open source tools out there too, like Biagio brought up QBench around CIS benchmark assessments, and also Trivy, which we actually have built in as a module. So there's a lot of flexibility on how you want to build these out. And that's the key, is that you really want it to be as flexible as possible when you're building it out. And as Jimmy mentioned earlier, it's kind of like building Lego bricks as each of the stages in your process. So you want to be really cognizant about, again, where you're decoupling each of the pipelines so you can reuse them in others. And a good example of that is you may do image hardening or image scanning and hardening that you want to use in different in Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes like AKS or EKS or GKE on the different cloud providers. And so you can, if you have that decoupled, then you can introduce it into each of the you know, different types of managed Kubernetes that are out there, or even if you're using vanilla or other orchestration products too, like Rancher and so on. Next slide. So for us at Refactr, we look at DevSecOps really as needing to be a collaboration between DevOps and the security and ops team. We're introduced in, we have a full platform, low code on the front end, but we also allow for, we expose our DSL as well. So you have full flexibility over how you want to build your pipelines, customizing those pipelines, each of the different areas that you want to be able to build security into your pipelining process, and being able to also be able to integrate it into your existing investments. A lot of organizations have different CI/CD platforms in place. You may also have other products like cloud management platforms and other things in place. So being able to be able to integrate those in is really critical. And so we focused a lot of time and attention on building out our SDK. We have a CLI, an API. We even have an incoming webhook system, which is really critical, again, to make sure that you can continue to realize your existing investments in different products you already have in place, even your own IP as well that you may have in place. The other thing I would point out is we have a lot of different modules in place too to support what the DevOps team wants to be able to use. Various things like Terraform and Ansible, and even Vault for secret management, and other tools in place like Trivy, as I mentioned earlier, in Bridge Crew, Checkoff, and Accurix TerraScan. So we've incorporated different tools in there, but you can also incorporate your own tools as well by just building a pipeline that you can incorporate into your process. So if we don't support it as a module, you can just package it up as a repeatable pipeline and add it into your, or build it in your project. And you can also package those up and publish them out to the solutions catalog or catalogs, which is a really nice functionality to be able to push out and share solution pipelines that are created. And I'll show that in a demo, but that's key when you're building out these different Lego blocks, we call solution pipelines, that you want to have available out there, so that you can share and have them, make them accessible. And then you can also keep your stuff private into your own in your own projects as well. Next slide. So the other key important part on there, and it touches on the slide earlier, is the runner. So we're very much on the need for architecture that is hybrid. So being able to run your pipelines both on-premise and in the cloud. And again, figuring out where you're going to decouple pipelines that you can run both on-premise and in the cloud. We have some customers that are running different workloads in their own, say, VMware environment, in their own data centers. and obviously in the cloud, public cloud as well, being able to support all the major cloud providers. And the key there is with all of the different tools that we support. So if you want to build out, say, infrastructure as code, using something like Terraform is definitely top of list when you want to build both against on-premise and in the cloud. And there's a lot of different Terraform providers out there that you can utilize so that you can integrate into and build out that infrastructure as code. The other key thing to here is the ability to execute those pipelines in runners that can be self-hosted and then also run in the cloud, which is also super critical because you want to control your runtime environment where you're going to execute those essentially what we call jobs with those pipelines in them. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to run jobs both on premise and in the cloud. And most organizations that I work with today are hybrid, and I don't see that changing in the future from the DoD to different enterprise customers. So I would definitely look at when you're building out your pipelines, determining what makes sense to build out that can be used both on premise and in the cloud. Next slide. So one of the key features that we have, and this is super critical when you're building out and wanting to share content out there, which we again call solution pipelines, is the ability to build the pipelines off of the modules we have. Those get packaged up into a pipeline. Those pipelines can actually be chained together, so you can create an end-to-end solution, having each of those packaged up pipelines inside of what we call a solution pipeline, and then that can be shared through the solution catalogs. You can also share inside of the project as well with other users and other organizations as well. So very flexible on how you want to create your pipelines and share them out. We also have the ability to be able to share those pipelines out in the catalogs with access control on them as well. So if you want to set them up and have an approval process for those as well, you can do that. And lastly, you can share it through the solution catalog internally as well, which is super critical if you want to be able to share between different teams and be able to share these pipelines out and maintain them inside of your project, but be able to have the different teams using them. And good examples as if the DevOps team is creating, say, infrastructure as code pipelines that they want to share out to the security team, then they're accessible and available. And every time you update that pipeline, you can publish out a new version and have that available. So you can actually maintain it from your projects and make them available. And this really helps to enable collaboration across teams and even across organizations and be able to use that. So whether it's Trace3 or Aqua or anybody else that's publishing out these solution pipelines, having them available to you. And we just launched this product a few weeks ago, so it's relatively new, but it's super exciting, and there's a lot of functionality built into it. Next slide. So before we get into the demo, I'd like to go over also the customer ROI. So again, just focusing on what we call level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Level 1 is really about creating these repeatable security use cases to help drive down costs. I always recommend, again, starting small, because you really want to be able to prove value in the organization on how this is actually going to work and be able to tie it in to what the existing teams are already doing. Level 2 is really being able to take those use cases and tie them into your existing DevOps workflows or even your agile IT workflows if you're using other products like cloud management platforms or even your own IP. But really, that's key to being able to build solutions that you're really trying to tie into and have the interoperability and being able to continue to realize the investment into those products. Level 3 is really over time being able to drive down maintenance or essentially drive down your costs, but be able to have everything in a maintainable format that's easy to update and customize, because every single engagement and use case is different. And so you want to have the flexibility to be able to maintain that, but again, driving down costs over time. And level 4 is really about accelerating from an innovation standpoint. So talking about Kubernetes or anything that's really kind of, I wouldn't say Kubernetes anymore bleeding edge, but definitely still newer technology in the organization, being able to accelerate not just revenue, but also innovation internally. Everybody is trying to achieve digital transformation, but really that's kind of mapping the business requirements to the technology that you can utilize. And so DevSecOps is really about being able to accelerate innovation, which will then in turn accelerate revenue. All right, next slide. I think we're ready for demo. All right, so let me share my screen. All right, we have liftoff. Awesome. So I'll work through and build out a pipeline today. So we'll show how a solution pipeline can be built out. I also want to focus on what we have built out with Aqua Security specifically, and then I'll introduce some of the pre-built solution pipelines that we have around managed Kubernetes as well. But the key here is to realize that there's, what we have is a concept called organizations. In the org, there are projects. In that project, you can build your pipelines. Each of the pipelines is built off of built with a low-code drag and drop builder. So there's all kinds of different tools that we have in here that we call modules. Each one of these can be dragged in, and then you can actually configure it inside of the pipeline builder. The other key thing here is that you can actually create different data types that become inputs into your pipeline to make it super easy for users. And it's really about collaboration. You know, each user may be at a different skill level. And as Jimmy mentioned earlier, the skills gap is a huge issue, especially across DevOps and cybersecurity. And so making it easy for the cybersecurity practitioners to be able to come in and actually use the platform, but also supporting all the different tools that the DevOps folks and the structure of what they're expecting and how things are built out. And really, it's the key thing here is to make sure that you're building something in a much more modern approach. So from a standpoint of inputs, we also have a credentialing system built in. We also have secrets management with HashiCorp Vault, and we'll be adding some others in here as well, to make it easy as well to connect. You can think about it like an integration fabric where you can connect not just the different tools, but also the ability to integrate in via credentialing, different types of input variables, different data types that you can have in here too. And then the other thing I would point out is the ability to have outputs that you can have readily available in a input of another pipeline. And the key there is then you can build these Lego block like pipelines to be able to chain them together. So you start out building one pipeline, and then you can actually chain the pipelines together to create the solution you're trying to create, and be able to also have it future-proof where you can come in and make updates and changes, and we have a revisioning system built in as well. So in this particular pipeline, we actually we're using Ansible. We're going to do a scan of a Docker pull of an image, and this will be a container hardening image. And then I'll show how this will work with a managed Kubernetes cluster as well. But the key here is each one of these we have a tool installer capability as well. So you can actually control the versions of the tools you want to install. We also have the ability to pass in content. So another thing I'd point out is we support various content natively. So if you want to use a shell script, or you want to use PowerShell and Ansible playbook, you have the ability to do that and use native content in line. You can also pull in from Git, which is super critical as well. Again, wanting to make this very, very much something that DevOps folks love using as well, but making it easy for the cybersecurity practitioners to actually use too from a form standpoint. So everything you see here in the form and in the builder is actually also in our YAML definition as well. So then this is totally editable as well. The other thing I would mention is the ability to pop in content with other tools. So this is an Ansible playbook that's popped in here as well. So you notice this is all for demo purposes, we have it in line so you can see it. But if you wanted to actually pull from a file and pull from Git and use that as your workflow as well, you absolutely can. So this will actually pull that image and then scan that image. So if I go to the jobs now, I'll show you how this works. And we can actually run that job. So you saw the different variables that are set up here. Those then you can actually set up and pass in specific variables from a job perspective into the pipeline. And the nice thing about that is you can have multiple jobs for different environments. So if you have a dev and a staging and a production, you can have different jobs mapped to that. You can also just have it for different customers too, depending on how you have this structured as well. And be able to then pass that in, leveraging our credentialing system, and then any of the other specific inputs that you want to have into the specific one. Here we're actually using AquaSec Enterprise, so we're able to do that and tie that directly in for this scan. And then the last thing, we'll actually have an output.json file that will get generated when we run this pipeline. So I'll click run. And this will run through the steps here. And as that's going, as it's queuing up, I'll go back to another pipeline run so we can just see that one that's already run, so you can see the output data. And then I'll work on another pipeline we can just show with Kubernetes using this. So the nice thing about this scan is we have now all this output data available, and that is what is in that vulnerability scan key that we saw in the outputs. So now all this data you can actually utilize inside of this from this pipeline. And so if you want to be able to set up logic here as well to be able to say, hey, look, I have so many different vulnerabilities, I don't want to continue on, I need to go remediate this before I do that. You can absolutely do that and build a logic in, but you can see here, this is all the data back from the Aqua Enterprise setup that we had for the scan of that image. And then I will create a new pipeline. That I can show you using that pipeline, which we can actually introduce into a building out a pipeline. So I may want to be able to use that to be able to scan the images here. The other feature that I mentioned earlier are catalog features. So if I want to come in here and be able to pull out say a AKS cluster and have that available in here too, I can drag these in and I can start building out my overall solution, which gives me the ability to then customize a solution that I want to actually build off of content that has been created and published out by different organizations, again, being maintained by that organization. So you have the ability to then utilize this this pipeline. And the nice thing about it too is it gives you all the different inputs that you can have available, so that you can then input in or set them all up here in here with a nice form that gives you all the information about the pipeline that you're going to add in. And then you can continue adding in other steps into your process. So if I wanted to incorporate other steps in here as well, maybe I have something with kubectl that I want to add into the process as well before I deploy the cluster, or after I should say deploy the cluster, I can do that as well. And so you can start dragging and dropping in your different steps inside of your pipelining process. If I have other ones in here like HashiCorp Vault, I can use for secret management. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to be able to utilize each of these steps in here. So if I want to pull credentials in first and then use those when I'm running the image scan, then have the AKS cluster run, and then if I want to then have, say, a kubectl run after that. So it makes it super flexible as you're building this out. You have the availability to mix and match modules, pipelines in your project, and then also catalog pipelines, and you can use them all in a pipeline you're creating inside of your project. And the key there is, again, about the building blocks where you can determine what makes the most sense for the different steps inside of your pipelining process. have the ability to also swap out different steps inside of your pipelining process too. So if I wanted to have a different step inside of my process, I can also swap out a different one here, and then I have the ability to, so if I wanted to use EKS, for some reason I'm on low bandwidth here, so it's not loading, but I can swap that out too. So if I didn't want to use AKS, I could use EKS or GKE or any of the other ones that are created and available as well from the catalogs or from the pipelines inside of my project. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to be able to swap out different steps inside of my pipelining process, which is, again, super critical as we're building out a solution and creating this end-to-end solution. And then in the future, if you're, instead of using Vault, you may be, your security team may be using CyberArk or some other sort of secret vaulting, or maybe you want to use the cloud security posture management product from Aqua, and you want to do that for IAC scanning. You can introduce additional pipelines that you package up into the pipelining process, which is really makes it super easy to be able to create these solutions. And once you have the pipelines created, they become repeatable pipelines you can maintain and have available, and then publish those out. And it's one of those things where it's really about functionality longer term, because some new tool may come out, some new service offerings, some different Kubernetes distribution comes out, and you want to be able to build stuff up around that and be able to use that. I do work with the Air Force and the DoD too, and they have all kinds of different Kubernetes distributions they use. So they want to support some now, like Rancher and Convoy, but there's others in the future that they want to support as well. So it's really critical to be able to have the flexibility to create the pipelines as you want to create them, and again, being able to publish them out and have them available from a solution catalog standpoint. Can you guys still hear me? Hopefully my internet didn't hang.
Yep, we can, Michael.
Okay, perfect. So it's just my my setup here. The last thing I would say as you're building this out too is you really want to think about adding in logic into your pipelines as well. So if you're going to have the capabilities to make decisions, you may want to have a conditional gate set up here too. You can also skip individual steps as well, which is super critical to be able to introduce logic in here. So if I wanted to have a step after this image scan, that gives me the ability to, if it came back and I think this scan had 100 plus vulnerabilities, I probably don't want to continue on in this pipelining process. So I may want to add in some logic as well to skip every other step after that step to give me the ability to then skip the additional steps in here. You can also set up notifications as well, and you can create these yourself. You can also add them in as well from different catalogs that are available. So if something happened and I wanted to send, say, a Slack message after that or an email, I can do that as well and just add these in. And again, because they're repeatable pipelines, the nice thing is if I add in, say, a Slack message after this, and I have this available, which is from a solution catalog, and then I have this here, I can determine if I want to skip this step, or I don't even have to have a conditional gate. I could actually just set a condition on this step, and I would just set that at the very end here to show you. So you can set a condition down here with our expression engine, and then that could skip the step and move on to the next step, which would give you the ability to then customize this from a standpoint of your Slack message that you may want to have spit out depending. So all kinds of flexibility here, and you really just want to think about how you're building this out. And I would just, again, reinforce, you want to start small. So you may have a couple of steps in your first pipeline that you're building out. And as you're building that out, you can continue to add additional pipelines to your pipelining process. But it's really critical to think about as you're architecting and building out these different pipelines. And the last piece I would just hone in on is the ability to tie this in to your existing workflows. So from a job perspective, you can actually integrate this into a, let me save this real quick. You can integrate this into, all right, give me 1 second. You can integrate this into a job, and if this will load, but essentially you can run it as I did, essentially manual automation, but you can also set up on a schedule, and you can also use our incoming webhook system, which is super nice for other systems that have webhooks built in. So if you want to trigger this off of, say, a Git commit, or you want to tie this into, say, ServiceNow or CSP or a cloud management platform, you can absolutely do that as well. All right, well, I think I'm finished for the demo, so we can open up to questions.
Great. So any of the attendees, if you have any questions, please, either use the chat, or we can go ahead and make sure we unmute you and allow you to talk. So, and feel free to also raise your hand, and Steph can.
I know there's some questions out there because I recognize some of your names in the attendees list.
Let's go ahead. So Jimmy, I'm going to go ahead and share the actual summary slide, and then we can bring that up and see if there's any questions then.
Sure. Oh, well, questions flowing through. Just a quick recap summary of what we discussed so far, right? Just a couple highlights. We're talking about cloud native, right? DevSecOps definition, but really around the benefits. We all know the benefits, but just kind of say that it's, while it provide benefits, it's hard to do, right? Hard to implement in practice. But also that the whole notion of the shifting to cloud native, and a couple slides on Kubernetes is it's difficult. It's complex. It does require a little different approach, right? So making sure that all the pieces are covered, especially when you apply automation to it. But also really the last part, right? What Mike just covered, right? Just looking at Aqua, how Aqua is a full cloud native platform, dressed, a couple things around securing cloud native workloads and configurations in Kubernetes, right? In conjunction with the Refactr, hopefully you guys realize the benefits after the live demo from Mike around going back to the connecting these Lego blocks, right? We talked about flexibility, extensibility, and repeatability to make DevSecOps implementation automation really easy, right? And so it's achievable at scale. And lastly, if you can do all these things and the result is successful DevSecOps implementation, then definitely there's a positive business ROIs, right? And as one of the slides discussed, the cost reduction, which is a really good thing when you want to create positive business, demonstrate positive business values through DevSecOps. All right, back to Brian. Hopefully we have some questions coming in. We have a couple more minutes.
Yeah, if there's any questions, please jump in. If there's not, these are different ways you can definitely contact us here at Trace3, or Mike at Refactr, Biagio at Aqua Security. We will be going ahead, and this session was recorded. We will be posting this out on LinkedIn and such, and following up with everybody. It looks like we do have a question here.